Hello everyone, it's NerdGasm. A few months back, I reviewed 2009's Infamous, developed by Sucker Punch Productions. It's one of the best superhero titles of the 7th generation, one a lot of people tend to overlook. It's centered around an original superhero character not featured in any comic books, named Cole McGrath, a bike messenger imbued with electricity-based superpowers, the result of a mysterious explosion he found himself in the center of within the fictional Empire City, located in the New York area of the United States. Infamous featured a fairly interesting story, a compelling and unique central villain, which flipped a lot of the genre's tropes on its head, and of course, addictive and enjoyable gameplay, allowing you to wield a variety of electrical attacks. In 2011, Sucker Punch would release a sequel, Infamous 2, which in many ways, like all sequels, built upon what was established in the original, mainly in terms of its gameplay. Many fans consider Infamous 2 to be the superior game, surpassing the original, but I don't know if my opinions on it are so cut and dry, hence why I am making this video review to flesh out my thoughts. One thing is for certain though, yes, Infamous 2's gameplay is much better than the previous games. The animations are stronger, and the controls are far more polished and responsive. You do have the odd issue pop up in regards to climbing again, missing what you are aiming for, because Cole attaches onto things like a magnet, but not as frequent and annoying as it was in the first game, at least for me. In terms of Cole's powers, a lot of his base abilities are more or less the same as we saw in Infamous 1, so I'm not going to go over all of them again here. Just watch my previous review for more information on that. But there are some cool new variations to them that you can switch out at any time, allowing you to fire multiple energy bolts or grenades at once, for example, or a shockwave attack that latches onto enemies before detonating. Later in the game's story, you are also given the option to absorb either fire or ice abilities into your already vast arsenal of powers, and some of them can be really fun, adding a whole new layer to your combat. But I think one of the greatest improvements Infamous 2 makes to its gameplay lies within its melee system. In the original game, it felt really awkward and clunky attacking enemies, but here it's as smooth as silk. You have a new weapon called the Amp, which Cole can channel his electricity through. When you land multiple hits on your opponents and build up enough energy, you can activate a variety of melee finishers. Infamous 2 features blast cores, artifacts that Cole finds throughout the game's story that he must activate by sending a surge of electricity through, augmenting his powers. They replace the sewer upgrades from the first game, and you'll need to absorb a certain amount of them to finish the game and confront the main antagonist of Infamous 2, which brings me to this game's story. Infamous 2 takes place about a month after the events of the first game. Empire City becomes threatened by a large and powerful pyrokinetic conduit called the Beast. The Beast had been mentioned in the previous game, this apocalyptic-level threat Cole had to face sometime in the future to prevent the destruction of not only his home of Empire City, but possibly the rest of the world as well. At the beginning of the game, the Beast attacks Empire City, materializing in Archer Square, arriving sooner than expected. Despite Cole putting up a valiant fight, he is not strong enough to defeat the monster, and Empire City is completely destroyed. Cole and Zeke manage to escape alive on a boat, going with NSA agent Lucy Quo to the city of New Marais, based on New Orleans, Louisiana. She informs them that one of her associates, Dr. Sebastian Wolf, one of the scientists responsible for developing the ray sphere, has created an enhanced version of it, called the ray field inhibitor, that essentially acts as an anti-ray sphere. The RFI has the power to possibly weaken and kill the Beast, amplifying Cole's abilities, if he can grow strong enough to wield it with blast cores. The beginning of Infamous 2 is a little messy and frustrating in my opinion. Cole and Zeke have somehow repaired their friendship, as if nothing really happened between them during the events of the first game. At the end of Infamous 1, Cole wanted nothing to do with Zeke for what he had done to him and the city, regardless of whether or not he helped out in that final battle with Kessler. Having them be on speaking terms again at the start of this story feels really forced. Apparently, it was explained in the Infamous comics that bridged the gap between Infamous 1 and 2, but you can't expect gamers to track down that information, not to mention there was only a single month between the story of each game, so I don't see why it was necessary. Infamous 2 doesn't even attempt to provide an effective recap of the comic's events either, which seems odd. I didn't even know the comic existed when this game came out. Having Empire City destroyed right out of the gate in Infamous 2 also feels like a bit of a weak and lazy way to start this story. It makes all of the hard work to save the city in the first game, all the events that transpired in Infamous 1, feel a bit meaningless, like a big waste of time. You wonder if anything Cole had accomplished within that game really mattered when everything was said and done. The way Infamous 2 handles its opening, the fate of Empire City specifically, how lazily it was put together, I feel all it really does is undermine the first game's narrative. It feels like a giant reset button had been pressed, an Etch-a-Sketch shaken clean. That said, Sucker Punch made a lot of these choices to address a lot of the issues players had with the original game, finding the setting of Empire City to be rather dull and depressing to look at. The setting of Infamous 2, New Marais, is far more energized and populated, filled to the brim with personality. Though New Marais hasn't been affected by any apocalyptic events like Empire City was, with the Raysphere blast, it's still a lawless environment all the same, riddled to the bone with crime and corruption, the perfect backdrop for a superhero story like this. On top of facing off with the Beast, which I will go into more detail on in a minute, the secondary antagonist of this game is Joseph Bertrand III. He is head of the First Sons, located in New Marais, and also acts as the ruthless dictator of the city. He has established a form of police force known as the Militia, whose sole purpose is to exterminate all conduits, that is, superpowered beings, within the Infamous universe. In his speeches and other propaganda, Bertrand refers to conduit powers as being the devil inside them that must be cured. He calls all conduits deviants, demons, products of evil, and enemies of the city. Bertrand is a pretty effective villain in this game. A lot of his actions and motivations, seemingly fueled by religion or some higher power than himself, remind me of classic antagonists such as Reverend William Stryker, with his hatred and violence targeted at the mutant community, based on misunderstanding, ignorance, and of course, warped personal beliefs. But with that said, Bertrand is not as strong as characters like Stryker, nor is he as interesting and layered as Kessler was in the first game. Though that character had some issues related to his plan and motivations, Bertrand's are even more messy and convoluted in Infamous 2, because I can just sum this character up in a single word: hypocritical. He's a hypocrite. There's not much else to him, unfortunately. It may seem like this character is layered, that he has a lot going for him, but at the end of the day, he's pretty one-note, forgettable. You see, Bertrand himself is a conduit. He gained powers from a Raysphere he activated outside the city of New Marais, one he had Dr. Wolf build him, but the powers he received, the ability to transform into a giant monster called the Behemoth, either willfully or unwillfully, it's not really explained, were not to his liking. They weren't what he was expecting, and, like an immature child, takes it out on all the other conduits, because his powers are lame and theirs are better. That's really all there is to it. Bertrand puts all of his resources into forming and maintaining a militia to cleanse the world of superpowered beings, yet he uses his abilities to transform citizens of New Marais into biological monsters called the Corrupted, and experiments on Lucy Quo, pumping her body with an unknown substance, turning her into an ice-based conduit, and later transferring her powers into another mercenary group called the Vermac 88, turning all of them into conduits as well. While I enjoy a lot of these ideas from a visual and gameplay perspective, Bertrand's monster form makes for a really interesting boss battle, having to attack his weak points, and the cryopathic abilities of the Vermac 88 are pretty cool, no pun intended. You just wonder what this guy is trying to accomplish with everything. Bertrand hates conduits, wants them eliminated, but keeps creating more of them. It seems very counterintuitive for his plan. It is revealed that he's trying to ignite fear within regular humans, start a war between them and the conduits, I guess so humans can kill them all, but that doesn't mean it makes any more sense. What if all the conduits he created overpower the humans, which is a strong possibility. There are more now than there was before he started doing all of this shit. I don't think any amount of jealousy and hypocrisy fueling this character's motivations would reinforce a lot of his actions. Bertrand is just a very confusing character to me. You also wonder what he would do if he was the last remaining conduit. Would he end his own life to remove the final one off the playing field? Or would his religious beliefs give him some sort of immunity so he could survive and enjoy the new world he has created, free of all other conduits? Characters like Reverend Stryker work because they are unwavering with their motivations, and their actions accurately reflect that. If Stryker had hated mutants, wanted them dead, yet also wanted to be one himself, and ended up creating a bunch more of them to fight the X-Men or something, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. And that's really how I view Bertrand as a character in Infamous 2, because superficially, he has a lot of these same qualities. The framework of a great villain is there. It's just as the game progresses, and you learn more about him and what he has been doing, he just becomes weaker and more confusing as an antagonist, and it's a shame. I think there were some interesting ideas on display here. A lot of them are a bit cliché, of course, ones that have been done much better before, but they are interesting nonetheless. So the primary villain of Infamous 2 is the Beast, and I brought it up briefly earlier in the video. For what it's worth, I do enjoy this character. The Beast shares many similarities with villains such as Galactus, not only because of its immense size, but also because it essentially represents impending doom, the end of the world. The Beast blazes a path of destruction, starting with its razing of Empire City in the game's intro, and ending with its eventual arrival at New Marais. Throughout the game's story, every time you pause the game to manually save or to check on or purchase upgrades, you are shown a map of the United States, and each time you view it, the Beast is shown to be closer and closer to your location. It gives you this strong sense of dread that Armageddon is fast approaching. Every time you locate and activate a blast core, the game will remind you how many more of them you need in order to be strong enough to take on the Beast, as well as the amount of miles it is from the city. Though it's all scripted, you can never run out of time or anything like that, I do enjoy how Sucker Punch applies a bit of pressure onto the player using these very simple methods. The deadly Rayfield plague that was introduced at the start of Infamous 1, the result of radiation poisoning from the Raysphere blast, is another one of the main story components of Infamous 2, having begun to spread across the country, and it's also closely associated with the Beast as a character. If you have never played Infamous 2 before and want to avoid any spoilers as to the identity of the Beast, simply fast forward to the end of my review with the timecode indicated here. Okay, so this path of destruction caused by the Beast isn't really a path of destruction at all, from a certain point of view that is. The Beast is revealed to be John White, or at least it used to be John White, the undercover agent from the first game that had helped Cole track down the Raysphere. When he and Cole had found it, Cole destroyed the device using his lightning storm attack, only it would break open, creating some sort of energy vortex, which sucked John in and disintegrated him, Dr. Manhattan style. Though John's body was utterly destroyed, his mind would survive, and he would essentially become one with the Ray Sphere's power. The irony of the entire situation is that John allied with Cole during the events of Infamous 1 in the hopes that obtaining the Ray Sphere would stop the beast, believing the creature may have been created from it. How right he was. What's also ironic is that Kessler, during his entire struggle to turn Cole into the ultimate hero, strong enough to take on and potentially defeat the beast, Kessler would in turn be partially responsible for its formation. He helped bring about the death of his own family. That sucks. Anyways, yes, John White is the beast. Having harnessed the energy of the Ray Sphere, he now has the power to sense those that possess the conduit gene, and can activate the dormant conduit powers within humans. He had learned that conduits are immune to the plague caused by the initial Ray Sphere blast, and has journeyed from Empire City to New Marais in order to create as many conduits as he could, at the cost of human lives. He asks Cole for his assistance and tries to convince him that humanity is doomed. Only conduits will be able to survive the plague. He also explains that he had attacked Cole in Empire City after he had first materialized, because he was overwhelmed with his new abilities, and it took him a while to get a firm grasp on them. Much like the original Infamous game, Infamous 2 focuses heavily on choices, where you take the path of a hero or an anti-hero. By performing good actions and choosing the good ending, Cole saves humanity from the plague, using the RFI, killing the beast, himself, Quo, and every other conduit within its blast radius to do so. Thousands die so millions can live, and the demon of Empire City becomes the adored savior of New Marais. When I was playing Infamous 2 to capture the footage for this review, I chose to be an anti-hero, mainly to switch things up visually from the choices I had made in the first game. The evil ending has you save the conduits rather than the humans, allying yourself with the beast, going on a rampage through New Marais. John, feeling he lacks the conviction to kill any further, would end up destroying himself by transferring his powers into Cole, turning him into the new beast so he can finish what he started. While the evil ending has its moments, I do think it's far weaker of the two. Had I been playing this casually, I doubt I would have gone down this path, because it goes against all of your instincts while playing this game, experiencing this kind of story. The good ending makes the most sense, feels like a stronger conclusion, and it's considered official canon. The evil ending is just an alternate timeline, seeing as Cole survives that one. I don't think Infamous 2 is as effective as the first game was with its karma choices. The system has been beefed up a little bit. There are a few more things you can do to change your alignment, even improved good and evil missions throughout the story, but they don't feel like they have as much of an impact as they did in the first game, and they definitely don't have you questioning your decisions as much. Most of the choices you make in Infamous 2 are straightforward, black and white, and again, the good side is the clear path to take. It makes the most sense in this story, is the most justified with how it's presented. Having now revisited Infamous 2 for this review, I do think it's the weaker of the first two Infamous games. Don't get me wrong, as a sequel it has better graphics, animations, improved gameplay systems, and boss encounters. In that sense, it's the better game. But when it comes down to the story, the characters, the villains, the karma choices, all of that is inferior to the first games in my opinion. I just prefer Infamous 1 over Infamous 2. I feel it tells a much stronger superhero story by comparison. At some point I might review the third game in the series, Infamous Second Son, but I am in no rush to play it, and I am not promising I will ever get to it, because to me, Infamous died with Cole McGrath.
I wanted to say goodbye to him alone. He had been my best friend, and now he was gone. Sometimes I hear folks talking about conduits and humans like they're totally different. That's bullshit. Because there ain't nobody with more humanity than Cole McGrath. I love you, brother. And I'm sure gonna miss you.